Henry puffed crossly into the junction one day with a stopping train. Thomas was waiting nearby looking cross. 10 minutes late, Henry. I thought you of all engines know how to keep up with your timetable. Well, don't blame me solely for the delay, Thomas, Henry snorted. It's not my fault I had such a silly passenger. They pulled an emergency call and I got held up over at Crosby because of that. The passenger thought it was the call for beverages, but little do they know about emergencies. I told him off once he disembarked on my train. It felt good telling him off. At least I wouldn't have to suffer from his ignorance. Thomas hissed steam loudly, which gave Henry a bit of a fright. Henry, he snapped, you shouldn't have done such a thing. Yes, passengers can do silly things, but some passengers can go to great lengths to get back at an engine if they were told off. Why? Henry huffed. Because it happened to me once when I first started working on this branch line. I'll tell you all about it. And he did, and this was the story. Ever since Thomas had left his guard behind, the passengers on his branch line had second thoughts about him. He's rather an impatient engine, they would say. Yes, I heard about him leaving his guard behind from one of the buses. Thomas was cross when he overhears them. He huffed. It's not my fault that those big engines are late. Passengers, what do they know? He would often complain. One day, Thomas was waiting at the junction again for Henry, and as usual, he was getting very cross. Time and time again that slow coach has been late, he huffed, and he hissed steam impatiently. At last, Henry came. About time that you showed up, lazybones. You're late again. But you still don't know what I suffer, moaned Henry sadly. At that time, Henry was in a different shape and was painted blue. He was built with a small firebox and was sold to Sir Topham Hatt I, who was in desperate need of another engine at the time. But Thomas didn't care about that. He wanted to run his branch line perfectly. I don't know why the Fat Controller kept such a failure like you around, he said crossly, and as the guard blew his whistle, he puffed crossly away. Must be on time, he huffed. But by the time he had reached the next station, he was very late indeed. Oh, bother that Henry, he huffed. Serves you right, said a passenger crossly. How dare you treat Henry like that? Don't you know that your fellow engine is not in the best shape? And all you care about is your punctuality? Of course I do, replied Thomas crossly. I have to go as fast as I can because of that lazy engine, and all I get from the likes of you passengers is complaints, complaints, complaints. That's all you ever do, silly passengers. Thomas puffed away, leaving the passenger in fury. Annie and Clarabelle weren't shocked by Thomas's reaction. You shouldn't have said that. You shouldn't have said that, they twittered crossly. That's all what passengers do. They just complain. The two coaches knew that Thomas wasn't in the best mood, so they stayed quiet for the rest of the journey. As time went on, more and more passengers were taking the buses. This made Annie and Clarabelle worried. Ha! Scoffed Thomas. Let them take the bus. They'll come back to us. The next morning, Thomas was waking up to start his day. But as he puffed towards some points, he felt a jolt and a crunch beneath his wheels as he fell off the tracks. Ouch! He cried. After shutting off steam, the driver found the source of the crunching sound. It came from his wheels contacting some stones that were wedged against the points, so that Thomas couldn't get out. Thomas was furious. "Who did this?" "It was me," replied a voice. It was the passenger from the previous day. "That's what you get for calling Henry names and for being rude to me." Soon the police came and arrested him immediately for damaging railway property. Sir Topham Hatt 1 arrived. He talked to the passenger severely. The passenger also had some words about Thomas and told him about the tank engine. Then Sir Topham went to Thomas. He was not happy with him either. "Well, I don't condone this behaviour from Mr. Roberts, Thomas. I think it serves you right for being rude to Henry and your passenger. We are supposed to be running a railway, but your attitude has been causing our passengers to go on the buses. Once you're back on the rails, you'll be dealing with the quarry trucks until you think about what you have done. I rewarded you this branch line because you are a really useful engine, not because of your deplorable behaviour." "But, sir, everyone has been saying I've been impatient since I left my guard behind, and I was only trying to show them that I'm not." "Well, you should know that it don't come easy, Thomas," replied a voice. It was the real Glynn, who was left in the siding rusting away after being withdrawn from service. "Running a branch line is hard work. I know because I once ran this line myself." "He's right, Thomas. Edward will be looking after your coaches until you can be trusted again. I gave you this branch line, and one day I'll take it away from you." And Sir Topham left. At the quarry, Thomas had been busy shunting stone trucks around the yard, and he takes them to the junction, where Henry was waiting to take them to the harbour. Thomas apologised to Henry for his words. Henry smiled, and since that day the two had become good friends. As for Mr. Roberts, he was sorry too. He apologised to Thomas and to Sir Topham Hatt 1 over what he had done, and Thomas apologised too for his comments towards him. "Oh yes, I remember that now," replied Henry. "You have a point. Passengers aren't perfect, but they shouldn't take to extreme measures just to get their own back. I feel rather silly by telling that passenger off," he sighed. "The same could happen to me as well." "Exactly," replied Thomas. "Next time you see that passenger of yours, I think it's best to apologise before anything extreme can happen." And Thomas puffed away. Later, Henry was at the big station and he saw his passenger. Henry apologised to him for telling him off, and the passenger apologised for pulling the emergency cord.